Hi, everyone. It's Stephanie with the Patient Story. I'm having a great day. Hope you are too. And it's about to get better because of the guest we have today who has graciously offered to share her lung cancer story. So, Amy, welcome.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I am so thrilled that we were able to find a time to do this because you have really so much to share. And I think so many important messages for people, including biomarker testing, how important that is, and, treatment decision making. I know for you, you had to decide whether you wanted to take part in a clinical trial. You decided not to. And I think that's important to talk about as well, in addition to so many other things. So we'll get started, but before we dive into your cancer story, I'd love for you to introduce just a little bit about who Amy is outside of that, because as we know, we are so much more than our diagnosis.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, as you know, my name is Amy. I grew up in Delaware. I should say the Philadelphia, Delaware, New Jersey area. For most of my life, I actually worked in oil refineries. I was pretty much everything, secretary right up on to a machinist. I tend to really enjoy riding my bike. My current job now is walking dogs and house sitting for people when they're animals. Believe it or not, that's a really lucrative business.
Yeah, I get it. My sister has a pug and that's her baby,
Mm-hmm.
and my nephew. So thank you for sharing that. I know there's actually so much more we could talk about in terms of who you are, um, and family and support that you have. But we will talk about all that as
Sure.
we go into this conversation. But Amy, could you rewind back? I know this is a few years ago, to talk about when it was that you started feeling those first symptoms and what got you to go to the doctor.
Sure. Well, back in November of 2018, I had a flu shot. No big deal. I'd never had a problem with a flu shot before. Well, in 2 weeks, a lump had come up on my neck in a strange spot. I knew just from past it was a lymph node. So I just assumed that it was from the flu shot. Didn't think it was anything more than that. I felt a little run down, but nothing big. So after the 2 weeks, I had noticed that, or I'm sorry, after about a month, it had stayed there. So I had decided I'd better go call my primary care doctor.
So in the beginning, it was like, this is just something that is temporary and it'll just go away. Finally, a month later, you're like, this is a problem. Let's go check with the doctor. What did your primary care doctor do to check that out?
Sure. She originally took a blood test just to see if there was anything that would show up on the blood test. The blood test only showed a small increase in my calcium. Didn't think much of it. So she decided that I needed to get a CAT scan done on my lymph node. During that time, it had caught the top of my lung, my right lung, and had shown that there was a spot there.
So during this time, if you could bring us back, what's going through your head in terms of what you're dealing with? And are you nervous? What's going on?
I was incredibly nervous. For some reason, I knew it was lung cancer. I just felt it. I had no other issues. And I thought I had always known that lung cancer doesn't really show any side effects or symptoms, I'm sorry, until it's almost too late. So I had just known, and all I could hope is that it was an earlier stage.
So how did you get there with the doctor? So, this thing showing up, what was the next step?
The next step after that was I had to have a biopsy. So I had a CT guided biopsy of my lymph node, which at that point showed that it was lung cancer, squamous lung cancer. We didn't have it staged at this point. So after that, they had sent me for a PET scan, which showed that I had it in other areas.
Stage 4.
Yes, stage 4.
And how long did it take to get the results? And really, let's talk about how you dealt with that period of waiting for an answer.
Sure. Luckily, I've been kind of lucky. My doctors have all had a really fast turnaround. So the CT guided biopsy took maybe 20 minutes at the most. It was awkward. I was worried. I had results within about 5 hours. But during that time, I knew that it was cancer, and all I wanted to do was figure out a plan to get it gone.
When did you actually get that diagnosis? You have lung cancer. And can you bring us back to that moment of learning such devastating news?
Sure. It actually was on my birthday in December of 2018. So it was on my birthday. My doctor, I was actually driving somewhere, and my doctor had called me and said, "We have your results." And she said, "Are you with someone or are you at home?" Or right there, I know. I said, "Well, since you've kind of let it off that way," I said, "just tell me now. I'm at a stoplight." And at that point, she had told me I had stage 4 non-small cell squamous lung cancer. I had turned around and went to my husband, or called my husband because he was at work. And of course, I'm in tears because at this point, I'm like, "Oh no, it's real. It's really real." In my mind, I'm thinking my life has been so good up to this point. I have everything. I have my husband, I have a house, I have a dog. Everything is going great. And all of a sudden, just one little thing turned out to be pretty major.
How did you have that conversation with your husband?
I just told him outright on the phone. I said, "I have lung cancer." And the next thing I know, he hung up and came home. That was that. There was no, he couldn't handle it as much as I couldn't handle it.
Anything else you'd like to share in terms of, I mean, it's such like a powerful moment, of course, hard to process. I think the news, did you even, what were your thoughts? Did you think about breaking the news to other people?
Yeah, I knew I had to tell my parents. My parents were the second group of people I had to tell. So I didn't want to tell my mom first. For some reason, my dad has gone through so many medical issues that I figured he'd be easier to talk to about it. And I did. So I called him up on the phone. We talked for a good half hour about it. And I didn't have plans on what I'm going to be doing. But he just kept saying, "It's going to be okay," which parents are going to do.
It's their role, right? That's what were the next steps for you? You get told this diagnosis. Did the doctor or the office say, "Here's the next step. We're going to make this appointment for you"? Or did they say, "You have to find so-and-so now"?
It basically was, "We have an oncologist that you can go to discuss this." So I went to this oncologist, and funny enough, I didn't like his bedside manner. So I decided to get a second opinion. The second opinion basically was to get a new oncologist. So I ended up going all the way to a new medical group, I guess you want to say, and found a better oncologist who, again, told me the same thing he did. So there was no change.
So the first oncologist, by the way, was this, do you live in like a major city or close to one? Was this a major academic center or was this a community care center?
It's kind of a community, but more Midland. I ended up going to a university teaching hospital afterwards.
I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
But so the first oncologist, before we get into the bedside manner part of it, what was his sort of conversation with you about treatment options?
The first oncologist had basically told me, "We're going to do KEYTRUDA immunotherapy. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to start next week." And that was basically it, which I liked. I thought, "Oh, that's nice." But his personality didn't work for me.
What was it? What did he exude?
it's almost like he had seen so many people with cancer. It was more of a dollar thing than it was a feeling thing.
Just didn't feel empathetic. It was like
Exactly.
a transactional. It was transactional.
Yes.
Do you know if he was a general oncologist or a lung cancer specialist?
He was a general oncologist.
Okay. And then and then you said, okay, you know what? I can't work with this person. So even though it's stage 4, which of course is so daunting to hear, you're like, I need to have somebody else. What is your guidance to other people on the importance of finding the right person to go with you through this care in terms of a doctor?
Oh, you definitely have to have someone who not just treats you as a patient, but more can be a friend, I want to say. Somebody you can tell everything to, because you're going to have to through your cancer journey. So you have to definitely have a doctor that you jive with.
So what I hear you saying is that it's important to have someone you can really feel comfortable talking to, because you're having a lot of discussions and you need to have your voice heard as a patient, definitely. Yes. And so if the person you're working with, the doctor, isn't allowing for that to be the environment and the feel, it could be bad for the whole process of treatment decision making and anything else that comes up, right?
Yes. And you want to be able to ask questions. With the first oncologist, I didn't feel like I could ask questions. It was more like, this is what you're going to do and you're going to like it. And I didn't really want that.
So one directional. I mean, I think different people like different styles. Some people like when the doctor is more firm about, well, here's what you should do, and then others like it when it's, hey, here are your options.
Yes.
I tend to like the latter, with a little emphasis on, well, what are the options and what would you recommend? Like, what would you do if you were me?
Yes.
But the way they talk is important too. So thanks for highlighting that.
Yes.
So then you go to the second opinion. It's a larger academic center. Do you mind sharing which one you went to?
Sure. It's University of Penn.
Okay. UPenn. Yeah, absolutely. The conversation, how was it different? He basically said the same. He said, KEYTRUDA, let's do immunotherapy. But what else did he mention? And also, very importantly, how did he describe to you your kind of lung cancer, the stage with the MET amplification?
Well, at this time, we did not know that it was MET amplification. At this point, we only knew that it was stage 4 non-small cell squamous. So he had told me, he said, well, the gold standard is KEYTRUDA, just KEYTRUDA, nothing else. And he had said, however, there is a clinical trial. So I had to make the choice of whether I wanted to do KEYTRUDA or the clinical trial.
Okay, so Amy, I know that you then went to a friend because you knew that she had undergone a clinical trial.
Yes.
She was in a different cancer, myeloma, blood cancer, so completely different.
Yes.
It's just the issue of, do I entertain this? Do I want to participate? It sounds daunting. I mean, clinical trial.
Yes.
So how did that conversation go? What did you learn from her? And what would you like to share with other people who might be considering this?
Sure. Well, my fear was being new to the cancer world. I had worried between clinical trial being new and not really much known about it. And whereas KEYTRUDA had some data behind it, so I knew the side effects. She had explained to me the better choice would be to go with what's already known, to try that out first, and that there's always a chance there's a clinical trial further down the line. So you'll never know whether a drug works or not unless you try it. So I figured at that point, that right there was my biggest thing, was you're not going to know how it works until you try it.
So what I hear is that you wanted something more regular, more used by more people, something, as you had described in a previous conversation, as more tried and true. I do want to highlight that with clinical trials, a lot of time, people do need to read exactly what the different arms are, because they need to be at least the standard of care. And then you know, maybe if it's a randomized, then you get randomized into an arm that has the study drug or a combination that's new. So there's no such thing as, say, a placebo or anything like that. Right. I want to get that clear.
Yes.
You get at least standard of care. So you had also looked into, I think, or your friend had mentioned, make sure to read about side effects if they share them. And there's a lot of paperwork. So do you remember, is there anything else after reading the paperwork you'd like to share with other folks about things that they might want to watch out for?
Well, with my doctor had handed me paperwork, one for KEYTRUDA, one for the clinical trial. Clinical trial was actually a lot thicker than the KEYTRUDA one. So the side effects that were for KEYTRUDA were your normal, digestive issues, rashes. There's some funny ones in there. And as it turned out, I ended up having hyperprogression, which is also a side effect, which had happened to me.
So for you, it was really what weighed in for you was number one was, I just feel like I want something that I think more people have been on. That's what was described to you, by the way, as the gold standard.
Yes.
And then you wanted to also see side effects, weighing the quality of life impact.
Yes.
Do you remember in terms of the difference in, being able to be off treatment or not being off treatment? Did you see anything in terms of efficacy or, people do really well, or the promise of this study drug?
Well, it's funny. I had heard about it previous to that because I think maybe 6 months before that, they had the KEYTRUDA ads on TV. So it kind of pushed my thought that, wow, these people are doing really good, so that's going to be me. It just has to be me because the way they explain it is that a lot of people do very well on KEYTRUDA. I don't remember the same exact numbers, but it was high. It was high enough for me to say, oh, definitely try it for that.
Let's now shift into, we're going to go into our next segment, which will focus on all these different treatments, which will be immunotherapy, radiation therapy, targeted therapy, which you're still on, SBRT, and cryoablation. We'll touch on those last two as well. So Thank you, Amy, and we'll stick around.